The views and opinions expressed during Eye on the Triangle do not represent WKNC or NC State student media. Your dial is currently tuned to Eye on the Triangle on WKNC 88.1 FM HD1. Thanks for listening. Good morning, everyone. Hope you're enjoying your day. My name is Emilia Rivadeneira, host of Eye on the Triangle, and with further ado, let's get into some news.
Hi everyone, my name's Aliana, and I'm the editor-in-chief of the Nubian Message, the Sentinel newspaper for Black and marginalized students at NC State. Much of the issues that we cover are for Black and marginalized students at NC State, and also just Black and marginalized people in the nation and across the globe. So most recently, we had our Native American Heritage Month issue, and that focused on the issues and highlighted the beauty of Native American culture, both at NC State and on a broader level. One of the most interesting stories that we covered was on missing and murdered Indigenous women, the MMIW movement, that was written by staff writer Adriana Hernandez, and she interviewed a student at NC State who had done research on the topic. And the movement took off in around 2015 and is basically highlighting how there are a lot of women within the Indigenous community who are missing and murdered, and yet there isn't a lot of, prosecution of it by the federal government. And that also includes issues as far as the distinction between tribal law enforcement and federal government. And she was just kind of highlighting how important it is to pay attention to those issues, especially when it comes to, Black and brown women going missing and being murdered, and that being a very popular topic of national conversation. Alongside that, we also had an article about the Navy's apology to a tribe in Alaska that was 142 years too late. That was written by Nevaeh Sturdivant, and that was a very interesting article as well, in which the Navy bombarded a tribe in Alaska 142 years ago, and they only issued an apology now. And so it was very interesting to read the story of kind of their perseverance in spite of everything, and how they built themselves back up, and also how that will forever be a part of their memory as far as their interactions with the U.S. Aside from that, we also, of course, did a lot of election coverage, which is very exciting. We, of course, covered the election of President-elect Donald Trump. We also did some local coverage, including the passage of the Citizens-Only Voting Amendment, which changes the constitutional language of the North Carolina Constitution, of course, and takes away certain words like naturalized citizens to somehow imply that only citizens are able to vote, when in reality, naturalized citizens were always able to vote because they are still citizens. So
You guys did a project also with the News and Observer and Technician, am I right, this semester?
Yes, we did. Yeah, that was very exciting. We did a three-way collaboration between Technician, the Nubian Message, and the News and Observer, in which we published an election guide. Some of it was republished material, and other articles were kind of new articles that highlighted how students can get involved with the election and also understanding the election. So that was a really, really exciting collaboration to kind of just see the joint work between both the Nubian Message and the Technician, and then also such a high level publication like the News and Observer. That was really, really exciting and inspiring for a lot of our writers to have their work published in something like the News and Observer. And so a lot of our writers, they went all out, they published new work, and they published some really interesting articles about the future of America. So.
Yeah, and you also did live coverage on election night, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
So that is pretty exciting as well. And I wanted to ask you also, what has been the coverage that the Nubian Message has done pre-election season?
So a lot of our coverage, like I said, focuses on the Black and marginalized students at NC State. So for example, for Latin Heritage Month, we did a very kind of expansive coverage of the different events going on campus, and also the different issues, and then also highlighting the beautiful culture of the Latinx community at NC State. And so we had an amazing article by one of our staff writers who interviewed the Greek Latin community at NC State. Hashtag Amelia. So that was very exciting. But in general, we mostly, at least because we publish bi-weekly, what we try to do in every staff meeting is try to figure out what's affecting our community at NC State and also the community like across the nation. Like, what is it that students that look like us care about? Because of course, everybody cares about general news, but there's a lot of stories that go overlooked in the media when it comes to Black and marginalized students. And so that's kind of what we try and capture. So we've done so many different topics, whether it be, I don't know if you remember the story about Javion McGee, the controversy about him possibly being lynched here in North Carolina. And so we covered that immediately, trying to get to the bottom of what really happened. So things like that, or just in general, we also want to also hear from our community. So we do a lot of feature stories with students on campus. We did an article on what it's like to date interracially on campus as well, which is really, really exciting. We've done continuous election coverage, but outside of that, our coverage is very, very broad. But I think that like it perfectly encapsulates what people of color want to hear on campus, basically. So.
No, yeah, for sure. And what was like kind of your favorite um news feature this semester? I don't know. Some of your favorite like stories that
Mm.
you guys have covered.
I think that I would say my favorite like kind of trend of coverage would probably be within student government. So at NC State, there was a lot of controversy within student government because there was a Resolution 29, which is basically a ceasefire act passed by senators within student government, a ceasefire to kind of in try and help in, I guess, NC State's kind of involvement or investment in like Israeli occupation, whether that be through like companies that visit our career fairs or just overall providing more information about the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, which has now turned, of course, into a genocide. And so covering that was very interesting, kind of seeing the bureaucratic obstructionism that even exists at this university and having our staff writers go into, different meetings and figure out what's going on and seeing their coverage, I think was very like harrowing but also inspiring because it's a very, very real issue that affects a lot of students on campus. And so to kind of see like the Arab community at NC State be affected so much by this and kind of like the continuous overlook of like what they're facing on campus was very it was a lot to take in, but I would say that it was very rewarding in terms of covering it and putting it out there for students to hear because without that kind of coverage nobody would know. So I would say that like the coverage of Resolution 29 and also like the blockage against it and then the veto of it was very interesting, especially because it got passed and then it got vetoed. So it was in hearing the stories of different students on campus who have family in Palestine, who have family in Lebanon. It was just very harrowing. So I think that was some of our favorite coverage. I think our writers did a great job, especially Shayer, one of our staff writers, and then Isaac Davis, our managing editor, did a great job with that coverage. Some other trends that I really enjoyed have been our recent concert coverage. So we've really been trying to get into more of the concert space. So we covered the Tinashe concert most recently, and that was really, really exciting. We were able to have our multimedia editor, Abby, go to that event, and then also our photo editor, Kayla. And so we got amazing pictures of the event and just amazing coverage of what's going on. And so we want to do more concert coverage because, of course, a lot of the artists that are the most popular are like Black and brown artists. And so we really want to cover those artists and highlight how they're impacting our communities. And so we hope to cover Dreamville next year as well and hopefully be able to go to that as well and cover that event. So I think those have been two of the most interesting kind of developments in like our coverage at the Nubian Message. But I would say like overall, I think that we consistently have new and fresh ideas within our publication. I remember a couple weeks ago an article that got a lot of attention was to jort or to not to jort.
Oh yeah. I remember that one.
Yeah, it was to jort or not to jort. And basically one of our new writers wrote about the trend of jorts and how jorts have like changed. And for those who don't know, jorts are just like jean shorts.
Yeah.
And so how the trend of jorts has changed over the past 30 years and how it's come back into style and talking about, people who wear it in a very indie way, people who wear it in a very I don't know, like very fly, like Nike hype beast type of way. But it was just very, very interesting because you would think, okay, like people are wearing jorts, so what? But no, like we're doing the coverage to figure out what are the trends that are affecting our communities on campus, and that was one of them, jorts. So that was like a really fun article
Yeah.
to read, and I really enjoyed that one as well. So we have a lot of amazing coverage that goes from news to features to opinions, whatever it may be. Like the Nubian Message has it.
Yeah, and also you guys published an editorial this semester as
Mhm.
well. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, so our editorial was kind of based on the election, of course. It was called So What Now? And basically, we had a collection of our editorial board get together and write the piece. And we basically kind of wanted to communicate, I guess, a kind of pillar of hope and then also a message about how we feel as a staff amidst kind of all the turmoil after the election. Because at NC State, there was a surprising amount of like online hate against other students, which I was very shocked. And it was specifically targeted against third party voters and then also like Arab voters and just students of color in general. And I was just very shocked to kind of see that turning on its head within our community.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very sad to see. And so what we want to do with our editorial was kind of as a, historically black newspaper, we were expressing like our discontent with the election of Donald Trump, of course, but also expressing our also like profound discontent with the amount of hate that's been kind of used to propagate this idea that it's the fault of people of color that the election went how it did, when in reality that's not completely true and not true at all actually. And then also the idea is third party voters' fault, which is also not true. And so in the midst of like all the online backlash, in the article we just talked about how, of course, we are do not support the election of President-elect Donald Trump to office because we lived through his 2016 election, and to see the kind of like the Black Lives Matter movement, to see the COVID-19 pandemic, to see how divided society was. I don't think people understand how that affected people of
Yeah.
color. And I think people often overlook how like hateful of a time that was,
Mm-hmm.
how scary it was to be black and brown and indigenous in this world. And so I think that we wanted to like express that. And then we also talked about what it was like to cover the election live. We stayed in the newsroom for close to like 10 hours
Wow.
covering
Yeah.
the election. And I mean, we were just publishing articles left and right and creating social media posts. And I think like the kind of passion, the kind of like work that went into it was all towards like this hope that somehow we would get to like a result that we would somehow be okay with.
Yeah.
But in the end, we didn't get to that result. And of course, there were a lot of diverse opinions within the office, but we could all agree that like the result was not what any of us truly wanted. We wanted more. We wanted more for our communities. We wanted more for the Arab community at campus. And as a whole, we wanted more to end the genocide. And so to just see the election was a lot. Towards the end of the editorial, we spoke about how we were very disappointed and did not support any kind of hate online or in real life when it comes to the election, especially against Arab, Black, and Latin voters, because to see the kind of, I guess, like division within our own communities was very scary. And at the end of the day, like we said in the article, we are not a scapegoat for the failure of the
Yeah.
electoral system. And I think that's how people want to paint it. And so that's what we talked about. And of course, we tried to spread also like some kind of like pillar of hope. We found that in a CNN exit poll, approximately, I think it was, I want to say 40% of new voters in North Carolina voted for Trump. And so to see that kind of like wide level support for President Donald Trump. And of course, everyone has their own political opinions, but as a publication, we did not support his election. To see that wide level support, it just reminded us how much power we have as first time voters. I was a first time voter this year. And to see how much power we have, as Gen Z, as first time voters, as young people, to kind of change the course of an election. I think that was what we were trying to provide hope for, that in
Yeah.
2028 we can find a solution that works for everybody, hopefully. But at the end of the day, our electoral system is fractured in a way that cannot be fully fixed with just an election. So, as my professor says all the time, every 4 years the U.S. has a civil war, and that's kind of what we're living in right now. And the Nubian message is just kind of trying to provide hope and honesty and truth amidst that turmoil.
Yeah. But it seems like, you guys had a really just interesting semester covering
Yeah.
like diverse things, and I'm just like super happy to hear all of the amazing coverage that
Mm-hmm.
you guys have done this semester, and super happy to just like kind of start this collaboration with WKNC and the Nubian Message, providing a news roundup
Yeah.
bi-weekly. So yeah, I am really glad that now we have this space to kind of talk more in depth about the stories that you guys published, um, and touch on like diverse things. Thank you so much, Aliana, for that amazing news roundup. And like I said before, this is going to be an ongoing collaboration with the Nubian Message, providing this segments of a news roundup bi-weekly, to highlight their coverage on the diverse stories that they just put out there in each issue. But yeah, this is going to be also the last Eye in the Triangle episode of the semester. Um, and it is kind of sad, but do not fear. I am coming back next semester as host of Eye in the Triangle, and I'm really excited about just the coverage for next semester and kind of looking back at the coverage of this semester. It has been just amazing to be the host of Eye in the Triangle and cover the elections. It was truly just an amazing experience to cover it live, also on election night. But yeah, this semester we had a lot of coverage related to politics and related to just the broader skim of things that were going on in national American politics, because of the 2024 elections. And it just seemed right to finish and to just wrap up that election coverage with also an interview with a professor of Queen's University in Charlotte about just to kind of how to navigate having political discussions during the holiday season, because it is finals week, and the semester is coming to a close, and Christmas is coming up, New Year's Eve is coming up, and we're meeting with family members, and political conversations might arise. And so, yeah, with further ado, here's the interview. I'm your host, Emilia Rivadeneira, and today I'm here with Amy Sentimentis, Assistant Professor of Political Science at Queen's University of Charlotte. How are you doing, Amy, today?
I'm doing really well. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, for sure. Um, so yeah, Thanksgiving might be behind us, but the holiday season is still here. And with the holiday season, it comes just the challenge of spending time with family and friends who might have different just viewpoints on political topics and just a range of things. Um, so yeah, the first question that I had for you today is, do you think that because of the 2024 election and like the results, um does this will increase political tensions in the holiday conversations that we might have just during Christmas, New Year's Eve?
I think it just depends on the point of comparison. So, because we just had an election, I definitely think tensions will be higher than they were, say, a year ago at this point in time, because the elections have primed those party identities that we use to navigate the political environment. However, I think it could be worse as well. I know there were times when perhaps we didn't know the results of the election. Like the 2000 presidential election, I think that holiday season was rife with tension because the results had not been called yet. So I think on one hand, yes, there is going to be more tension because we just had an election, but we can see historically there have been examples where tensions would probably be higher. And even in 2020, I think tensions were higher than they were or than they will be this year because we had a decisive victory and we had a concession speech immediately following election day. So it could be worse.
No, yeah, for sure. And just due to like the emotion part and also just how polarized just the political discourse is today, how should people, especially college students, should approach just political discussions during the holidays?
I think it just depends on your own personal level of comfort at this point in time because we just had an election. I think some people are still feeling very deeply some of those emotions following the results being called. So, if people are in a place to talk about it, there are ways in which we can facilitate these conversations to make sure they don't augment the tension. But on the other hand, if you're still not feeling up to having those conversations, I think that's perfectly fine as well, because there are topics that you can talk about that unite more than divide families and friends during the holiday season. So it just depends on personal preference. But understanding that we are quite polarized as a country, but there are things that bring us together. And so if you want to try to emphasize those similarities as opposed to the differences, that can be a way to navigate these conversations. And also just, I know it sounds trite, but agreeing to disagree and understanding that people have such loaded opinions and they are so entrenched in their party identities. So it's unlikely that these conversations are going to change someone's mind, but entering them in a way where it may humanize the other or the out group. If you're a Republican and you're talking to Democrats, or if you're a Democrat talking to Republicans, it may illuminate at least where people are coming from. And that can be a way to forge friendships and emphasize those similarities as well.
Yeah, for sure. And one thing that I saw in the article that I came across from Spectrum News that I really just wanted to like touch bases on a little bit was the term of affective polarization. And I just wanted to ask you, what is that and like how does that comes into play now, just like in this context of like having conversations with family and friends during the holiday season that might be like a little bit challenging.
That is a concept that we've been studying more and more in political psychology, which is my area of focus and my research and my teaching. And I want to first compare it to what most people think of when they hear the term polarization. Most of the time, people think of what's called issue-based polarization. So the fact that over time, we've seen the Democratic Party become more progressive on various issue positions. We've seen the Republican Party become a lot more conservative on issue positions. And that is being driven by political elites who are elected to serve in office. So they're voting on bills, they're becoming more homogenous as a party. So previously, we saw a disagreement between the parties where Democrats would disagree with the Republicans' position on these issues, Republicans would disagree with Democrats. But affective polarization gets at the core affect that we feel toward the other side. So, what that means is we either like or dislike them. And that has grown over time where we're getting these feelings about the other side, not just those people who are elected to office, but those people in the mass public. So, our family and friends who are seeing these holiday seasons and talking about politics with, it's now gotten to the point where we're not just disagreeing with the other side on these issues, but we dislike the other side and think they're bad people, which makes these conversations a lot harder. So, adding that affective element is helping us understand why polls are showing that now people are less likely to befriend, date, marry those individuals who don't share that party identity because they dislike the people who fall under that label and embrace that label alongside disagreeing with what they think about certain issues. So we've gotten to a place where it's not just that, oh, Democrats think this way about an issue, Republicans think that way. It's Democrats and Republicans don't like each other because they see the other side as being bad people and immoral. in terms of their issue positions and just their beings in public.
And how might that just kind of change just how we interact with our family members, with, like having that view of like, we're not just disagreeing now about like an issue, but like, I actually am starting to, not like you or like think that you're a bad person. Like, and especially during the holiday season, which is kind of like, like we're with family, we want to enjoy the holiday season. Like, how might that kind of like just complicate things and like create tension between like family members?
With the rise in polarization, that party identity has become what I call and what political psychologists call a chronically salient identity in a political context. So, what that means is it's always at the forefront of our minds. And it's serving as this lens through which we process all incoming political information. So I like to give this analogy in class that we're putting on these red or blue glasses, and these glasses are affecting how we see everything and everyone in the political sphere. So after an election, those party identities are still at the forefront of our minds. And so if we're going into these holiday gatherings and we're seeing our family and friends, we're not seeing them as our family and friends per se. If we have our red or blue glasses on, we may see them as people who we like because they're also on our team. And studies have shown party identities have been more like sports teams where you want your side to win and you want the other side to lose. So we have these glasses on. We're seeing our family and friends not through the lens of being people we love, but people who are either in our in groups or they're in the out group. And like I said, that out group derogation is easier, and it's easier to stereotype the out group when those party identities are at the forefront of our minds. So just understanding that and understanding the psychology behind it can help us know why we're navigating these political discussions like we are. It doesn't necessarily change how we feel, but at least we can try to unlearn some of that behavior and some of those instincts to say, oh, I'm a Republican or I'm a Democrat, and everyone else who's not on my team is a bad person. So resisting the urge to stereotype and make those snap judgments is something that we can start doing, even if we still have these views that those people may not understand what it's like to be on our side, or they may hold some positions that deeply offend us.
Right, for sure. And I actually wanted to also ask you about like some strategies that we can take, during this holiday season about like how can we create more of a space for understanding rather than just like creating conflict or tensions at the, holiday table. Mhm.
Mm. There are several ways we can do this. The first involves meaningful contact with the outgroup. So it's going to be easier for partisans who have interactions with the other side to understand that the other side is full of nuance, just like our in groups are. So that meaningful contact is helpful. And I think having family and friends that we've known all our lives is going to make that easier because we know them outside of their political identities. If that is not an option, understanding that we share these what are called superordinate identities that transcend some of these smaller groups. So after an election, there's this honeymoon period typically where an incoming presidential administration tries to emphasize that we are all Americans or we are all part of the same team. So that way we're not fighting, between each other, and we're focusing on what we have in common. So over the holidays, understanding that you all belong to the same family or you're friends for reasons outside of politics can help you create those identities that can reduce the need to use the partisan identities to define ourselves.
And are there any specific topics in your opinion that you might say like let's just avoid completely talking about those topics in the table during the holiday season?
I'm sorry, can you clarify topics that you want to talk about or topics that you should avoid?
yeah, topics that you should avoid in the political just like sense, more specifically talking about like, in the aftermath of the elections, a lot of people might be frustrated and like disappointed about specific issues. And like, in your opinion, is it good to just like start conversations about those or just like completely avoid?
I think each person has a different understanding of what issue is most important to them. So those issues that we moralize tend to be ones that we see in right versus wrong terms. So there's less room for compromise on those issues. If you feel like your position is the right one and the other side is wrong, again, it's not just that my position is more left leaning or right leaning and the other side is more whatever the opposite is. It's I am right and they're wrong. So that just varies at the individual level. But we know from the exit polls that the economy and perceptions of the economy, immigration, crime, abortion for the first time, those were the ones that really defined this election season. And so potentially avoiding those, or if you do talk about them, understanding that people actually may agree on what is happening, but they may disagree on how to fix these issues. That can be a way to understand where people are coming from. But going to happy memories that you have as family and friends, that can be a way to diffuse some of the tension during the holidays. So I would recommend if you are to talk about politics, not to exclusively talk about it, because I think there are other issues that will bring you together and be more enjoyable, quite frankly, during this time, because I think, there's a negativity bias and we don't often talk about politics in a way that makes it seem like everything is going great and we have such respect for people who are elected and that sort of thing. Another way to kind of diffuse tensions may be to avoid talking about particular candidates who were running in the election. So focusing on those issues as opposed to the people may reduce the need to use more inflammatory language and argue and try to win, like I said earlier, advocating your position as a member of one of those partisan in groups.
Yeah. Um, and I actually was gonna ask you about how to de-escalate or like diffuse, like you were saying, just conflicts or like heated political conversations if those like arise in the table. But I also wanted to touch on like how to set boundaries of like conversations. I feel like a lot of just like college students like me, like um, they're open to having like political conversations, but sometimes it's really difficult to just like set boundaries of like what to talk about or like what might get me frustrated, especially with family members or older generations as well. So in your opinion, what are some strategies to kind of like set those clear boundaries with people that who we love? Mm-hmm.
Right. And in a heated moment, we often use a type of information processing where we're making these automatic decisions. And sometimes we say things and we regret them and we can't help ourselves because we just want to respond in the moment. But I've personally understood this and tried to reduce the need to make these snap judgments and just take a pause before I talk about some of these issues with people in my family and my friend groups. So, reducing the need to immediately say something, perhaps stepping aside, taking a drink of water, and just trying to bring the heat level down, for lack of a better phrase. But um, forming a rational, reasonable position that allows you to make your point and set those boundaries will be more effective than just trying to respond immediately. Additionally, to set and maintain those boundaries, it may be helpful to just say, I prefer not talking about this. I'm happy to talk about this later. I want to focus on this event or this gathering, and I want to enjoy my time with you. And I think that this may not serve me well, and this conversation may be best suited to another time. Saying that in a very calm, collected way will help individuals avoid those emotional reactions and help try to diffuse some of that tension and make things less heated than they already would be at the time.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. And like just the taking a breather, kind of like, like just a glass of water and like just, you know, chill for a second and then like
Mhm.
engage in those conversations. And I also wanted to ask you about like what do you think it's like a key thing to remember over the holidays to just like kind of understand that we might have different political views, but it's still like we're still part of the same family. What is like that kind of like key message that you would say to college students that like might just need that advice?
I think it just depends on individuals and their own experiences. I know for some, this may be a really hard time of year. And so remembering that you have friends and chosen family that may align more closely with your views might help you get through some of these uncomfortable moments, knowing that this will pass, but also knowing that these times often are taken for granted and you never know what's going to happen. So trying to give yourself space to enjoy what you can, but also understanding you can feel multiple emotions at one time. So it's okay to be upset and it's okay to hold that anger and process it accordingly, but also it's okay to enjoy yourself and have those moments where you are able to come together as a family or friend group and talk about those happy times you shared together. I think you can do both at one time. So that's helpful to remember. If you are someone who looks forward to these times of year, but are nervous after the election, understanding that these traditions that you may have in place are set up so that you can enjoy each other's company during these times because it is meaningful and they're going to be memories that you cherish forever. Often, when we're looking back in our memories, we remember the good times. And so, making sure you have some of those good moments to reflect upon will be really helpful for you. And you may not remember the bad ones. So there's going to be another election in 4 years. That's the other thing to keep in mind, that we do live in a democracy. People have the freedom and the right to hold different views. So that's something that makes our system work. It's something that our founders envisioned when they were creating the Constitution, to have freedom of expression and freedom of speech. So again, keeping those values close as well may be helpful, and may provide a mantra to use to get through the holidays.
No, yeah, for sure. Like remembering that as well, remembering it is really good advice. But yeah, is there anything else that you would like to add before we kind of just wrap up the program?
Um, I'm just really impressed with my students. I've always been really inspired by them. So teaching these classes and being able to do interviews like this is actually really helpful for me personally. So I've given these talks, and I'll tell you it's harder sometimes in person and not in these spaces, but it's helpful when you know the academic literature, but also understand that it's our human instinct to respond in particular ways, but to try to unlearn that, that's been really rewarding for me over the years.
No, yeah, for sure. And it's just really good to have like that advice too, like that understanding of like, for example, why we might react to those things, like understanding that part might be like, it makes it easier to kind of just like take it in for a little bit and then like, people are still going to be engaged in political conversations all the time. It's just like how those interactions like go. But yeah, thank you so much for being in the program today. I really appreciate your time. But yeah, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
This has been your host, Emilia Rivadeneira. Thanks for listening to Eye on the Triangle. For back episodes of the show, go to wknc.org/podcasts. Music in today's episode is Krakatoa by Noah Stark, licensed under Creative Commons. Happy holidays, everyone. Hope you enjoy your break.